In this video, we're going to answer the question, what's so great about Dungeons and Dragons? Hello and welcome to Attacks of Opportunity, a brand new channel devoted to all things Dungeons and Dragons. My name is Jon Sprunk and I'll be your host on this fantastic journey. Welcome aboard, and please hit the subscribe button below. Thank you. A little bit about me. I'm a published fantasy author. You might not have heard of me yet, and that's okay. I'm no R.A. Salvatore yet. I've got 7 published novels out in print, ebook, and graphic audio. But this channel is not about that. This is about my passion, Dungeons and Dragons. I've been playing Dungeons and Dragons for more than 40 years, mostly as a DM. I've played every edition from basic up to 5th, and I've got a lot to say about the subject. This channel will be mostly devoted to things that DMs can use, such as building adventures, encounters, campaigns, settings, and so forth. Okay, today's topic is why Dungeons and Dragons? First and foremost, it's the fun. You get to play a character different from yourself, whether a mighty warrior, a raging barbarian, a holy person, a master of the arcane arts, a sly rogue. You create the character, and then you play them in a fantasy world teeming with adventure. There's always danger over the next hilltop. Sure, board games are fun, and lawn darts can be fun, but most games become repetitive over time, because you're playing the same thing over and over again. But every session of Dungeons and Dragons is unique. Every combat is a little bit different. And few things are as satisfying as hacking and slashing your way through a horde of evil creatures to win treasure and magical items and notoriety, and maybe eventually become so powerful that you get to build a stronghold and have a little army. These are all things we read about in fantasy literature, and D&D gives us a chance to play these characters for ourselves. The next reason I love D&D so much are the friendships. I've made such long-lasting friendships through this game. All my best friends are players with me. I met my wife in college. She became one of my players, and eventually we got married. D&D is a collaborative game. That means all the players are playing together. You win together, you lose together. Although some campaigns can make it more competitive, by and large, most of the time, all the players are on the same team. Nothing beats getting together with your best friends around a table with some snacks, maybe a few drinks if you're of age, and imagining that you are characters in a fantasy realm where you get to do almost anything you want to do. You're presented with obstacles and challenges and foes, and you decide how to meet those challenges. D&D combines the arts of storytelling, improv acting, comedy, tactical thinking, and logic. It also harnesses your imagination. Now, everyone possesses their own imagination, of course, but there's something very special about getting together with your friends and harnessing all your imaginations together to create something unique and powerful together. Which brings me to the third reason I love D&D so much, which is the creativity. Just like writing a novel, D&D allows me to flex my creative muscles. As the DM, which is my favorite role to play, I create the narrative. I create the story world that we're playing in. I create the people and the things that the players encounter. It's like writing a book or a play, and then you get to enact it with your best friends. The campaigns I'm currently running take place in a fictional world that I created myself. I've always loved this idea, which is one of the reasons why I'm a writer. Ever since I've read The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings at age 9 or 10, I've loved the idea of this fantasy world that you could explore, and I wanted to have one of my own. D&D allows me to have that, and to share it with my friends. A lot goes into such an undertaking. You have to determine what nations exist in this world, what kind of people live there, what kind of creatures and beasts are there for the party to encounter. What is the history of this world? What gods and goddesses do the people worship, if any at all? You determine the geography, the weather patterns, the politics, Anything and everything the real world has, you can create. Honestly, I get almost as much enjoyment from creating the world and the adventures as I do playing the sessions. If you've never built your own homebrew custom setting, I highly recommend trying it. Even if you don't end up using it, the exercise alone teaches you so much about what goes into world building and settings. It'll really bring a new depth to your games. But don't all RPGs or role-playing games have these features? Sure they do. I played a ton of them, from Twilight 2000, Gamma World, GURPS, Champions, Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, Top Secret, and many more I'm probably forgetting right now. And all of them have something valuable to teach the role player and the DM. But my friends and I, no matter what we try, always come back to D&D in the end. There's something about the flavor, the way the rules are set up, that just appeals to us. So okay, what is it that keeps us coming back to D&D over and over again? That's not an easy question to answer, but I'll give it a try. First off, D&D gripped me way back in the day when I first played it with its most basic premise. You pretend to be somebody else who goes out into a fantasy world to encounter anything: monsters, traps, evil wizards, undead, trolls and goblins and giants, anything the DM can imagine. And you get a chance to overcome those challenges. You fight to win the day, and if you win, the victory often comes with a monetary reward, which appealed to me as an 8 or 9-year-old and appeals to me today. Throughout all its incarnations and editions, D&D has never lost that essential core, what the game is really about. It's about going out, seeking your fortune, seeking adventure, and doing so with your best friends. I also love D&D for the accessibility. Despite its handbooks filled with RPG and fantasy jargon and lore, the rules are actually quite simple at the basic level. You encounter obstacles and challenges. You try to overcome them. You're probably going to have to roll some dice to find out if you succeed or fail. If you succeed, you win. Maybe you get some money from it. If you fail, you lose. And maybe if you fail badly enough, your character could even die. Simple, easy, high stakes, high reward. Yet, despite that simplicity, there's also a lot of depth available in those rules. Now, it's not as complex as some RPGs out there. I'm looking at you, the hero system. But there is some depth under the hood. There's so many possibilities what your characters can do in any given situation. But my group doesn't like to get bogged down in too many rules or too many complex systems. We want the game to flow naturally from one event to another. We want to focus on playing our characters and not putting our noses in books the entire time. And I think D&D does a really good job with that, and it's gotten better over time. I believe the 5th edition has the best flow of all of them so far. The next reason I really love D&D is the magic system. I know. This is where I get comments about how the Vancian spell slot system is unrealistic and all that. I get it. It doesn't really resemble what happens to characters in our favorite books and movies. Yes, but for a game system as a design, it really works flawlessly. It allows spellcasters to build their power level over time. It makes sense once you've used it for a little while. It's easy to track. I've tried using alternative rules for my home campaigns. I've even tried my hand at writing a few of them in the search for that perfect unicorn of game balance and realism. It doesn't exist, in my opinion. If you get too realistic with your spellcasting system, it becomes really clunky, really difficult for a beginner to pick up. And if you make it too fluffy, then it seems like there's no rules whatsoever governing what casters can do and what they can't do. D&D sort of strikes that balance. It gives you enough of a depth of rule system that you know what you can do and what you can't do, and yet it's not so clunky that you have to spend the entire session pouring through your spell book or your rule book to figure out what you can do. And then there is the combat system, the beating heart of the rules engine, if you will. I recall how fragile our characters were back in Basic Edition, when it seemed like one hit would kill you. Power levels have fluctuated over the years with different incarnations of the game, Again, I think 5th edition does a pretty good job of balancing. I sometimes call it the superhero version because as your characters level up, they become quite godly in power. But at the same time, players love it because their character classes have so many awesome options and abilities that it sometimes feels like they can't play all of them in one session, but they want to. Like the magic system, the combat system is relatively basic on the surface. If you attack a creature, you roll a die. If you roll high enough, you hit and you roll damage. Do enough damage and the creature will fall and you win. Vice versa, the creature can do damage to you. If it does enough damage, you fall and perhaps even die. Pretty simple on the surface. But just like with the magic, there's a balancing act going on. The combat system allows for a great many options besides just swinging your sword over and over again. And the combat system is extremely satisfying. I think that's the most important element. I'm always willing to sacrifice some realism in an RPG if it becomes more fun for us. And the D&D combat system is, if nothing else, it's always fun. My players don't always remember all the little nuanced details of the campaigns I've laid out for them, all the story plot lines, and that's okay. But they remember the big fights. They remember that one time the party got involved in a battle royale, one against the other, ending in the flying castle that was their home, crashing into the ground, killing almost everybody. Those are the moments that D&D really excels at setting up. And that's what we're going to remember years later. My players still talk about that fight. Finally, D&D lends itself so well to storytelling. As a dungeon master, that's what I live for, creating that perfect story to share with my players. As an author and a DM, I tend to approach my campaigns and my books in much the same way. Conflict, opposition, helpful allies, obnoxious betrayals, and so on. All the things that make a great story dwell right inside Dungeons & Dragons in almost every session we do. I'm sure I could do that with almost any RPG out there, but D&D just sparks my imagination like nothing else. And judging by how many millions of people play it across the world, I'm not alone. I lived through the 80s with the Satanic Scare, where the moral authorities tried to inflict their mental illness on all the rest of us, judging us for what we played and what music we listened to. It's so gratifying now, in 2020, to see D&D is firmly in the mainstream, along with so many other great games. To me, D&D is more than just a game. It got me through school. It got me my best friends I've ever had. It got me my wife. And it got me published as a fantasy author in some very real ways. The storytelling I did building my campaigns all through middle school and high school and college was training for writing. And I owe D&D a debt bigger than I could ever repay. So now that I sound like a complete fanboy, and I am, I'm going to draw this video to a close. Please hit the subscribe button below and share this video so we can start to grow. I've got a lot of stuff planned. I want to explore how to build campaigns from the ground up, how to build entire worlds from the ground up. Please come along and join me on this adventure. Thank you so much and have a great day.